This is an industry where detail orientation is extremely important. This is an industry where things are just like that, and if you're spending like 5 to 10 minutes trying to find it, the meeting's already started. These are basically some best practices that will make you not only efficient but also effective, and in general just save you time so you don't have to be spending more time at work than you need to be doing. And sometimes this can mean the difference between saving a couple minutes on a day-to-day basis, but that really adds up. Have your own cheat sheet. Now, if you watch my previous videos, you've seen that I've talked about GMAT cheat sheets, and you can make one for the job too. What this means is that I will sometimes copy and paste formulas, Excel formulas that are maybe complicated and it'd be difficult to replicate very quickly. I will put them in, say, like my notes, or put them in like a Word document. So if I need to go and do a complicated function, I can just copy paste that and modify it as I need, change the links, change the references, etc. And it's just very quick. This also is helpful if you're using software such as CapIQ or FactSet, where there are these codes that you might use, but depending on scenario, you might use different ones, and instead of manually doing it, you can just do a quick copy paste. This does save a decent amount of time, and sometimes you could just have a template that has all of these, but I found that it's really nice to be able to have this go-to list with all of the things that you need to know, where you can't easily replicate it in like a few seconds or a few minutes. What was really nice about my class was that when we first were incoming, we had people in the class above us send us their own like cheat sheets or their own references of like email templates, key formulas, etc., that they found were really helpful for them. And you just keep building off of that and have this like shared sheet where everyone can reference, and it just makes the whole group so much faster on a junior level. So that's like a really nice thing to have. Making sure you're saving it in a place that makes sense. If it's a new client or something, create a new folder for that, and making sure you're understanding how your team usually does things, because I have seen with the first year analysts coming in, they'll organize it in their own way, and it's really confusing to me and the other team members because you've never seen it done like that, and it's not categorized in the most efficient way that we're used to doing. And so, for example, I will do one for the actual PowerPoint discussion materials, and then one for the backups, which are the Excel files, and another one for references, etc., etc. So that just keeps everything more simple. Use shortcuts if you need to, where you can link a file path to another location so it's easy to find. Making it as quick as possible. Knowing where things are is so important, because sometimes it's like 2 minutes before a call and your MD is like, oh, I want to see this thing right now. Can you please send it to me before the call? And if you're spending like 5 to 10 minutes trying to find it, the meeting's already started. So just making sure you're able to pull up things very quickly, pull up things accurately, and this includes websites too. Maybe just have like bookmarks for the websites that are commonly visited. For example, BAMSEC if you're looking through filings, and access that really often so you don't need to type it in every single time. And always version up. Okay, when you're working in PowerPoint and there are some changes, always make sure to version up. And to save as, that shortcut is F12. The goal always in banking is to not use your mouse. So the more shortcuts you know, the better it is. You can save it as like version 2 instead of version 1. Why you want to do this is because people in this industry change their minds. Sometimes they ask you to change the format or revert back to the same format, or they decide, actually, we do want this page, or actually, we don't need this page. And if you keep saving on top of that original file, you will just lose all of those changes and have to revert back to something that you already did. And that's such a waste of time. So always version up. I've seen people make mistakes as saving over the previous one, and when it comes back to making changes and revert back to something we had beforehand, it's just annoying knowing that you already did it and now you're spending an extra hour or two going back to the original version because you didn't take the 2 extra seconds to version up. So another thing is just assume that you're gonna have to go back to the Excel file, especially sometimes PowerPoint, mostly Excel file that you're using, and try to keep it as neat as possible. Sometimes it'll take more time to set up, but make it as intuitive and clear as you can, because more often than not, you're gonna have to be going back into it. Someone else is probably gonna have to reference that thing as well. So you're just making everyone's life a lot easier. There have been so many times where I've opened a backup and I'm like, I have no idea where this hard code came from because there's no comment. I have no idea where this came from or how they approached this because I have no context whatsoever. Some people may have felt the same of my files when I first started. So just making sure that you're putting in the appropriate comments, appropriate footnotes, and making sure to highlight anything that you made changes to that really isn't intuitive, because someone else may need to reference that. And mentality that you can have just going into these like backups or PowerPoints that you're setting up is just kind of assume that someone else is going to be in it, someone else will be checking it. It will probably be sent out to someone else. And if you are operating under that assumption, then automatically you are trying to set it up in a very neat way. Please, 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 please close out of files if you're not using it. Making sure you save it down before you do. I have seen people, they end up keeping the file up on their desktop. Let's say you're working on like project ABC, right? And you have the latest model open. It's really late and you decide you're gonna go to bed. For some reason you have left it open. If I want to modify that model the next day before you've woken up, I don't know when you made the last changes. I don't know if I version up, if I'm gonna lose the changes that you made, if I'm gonna lose some of the comments that you incorporated. So this just leads to version control issues. And I know, like, especially if you're just coming in from college and you're not used to having such shared drives, shared files, where everyone's kind of working on one thing, it's sometimes hard to remember to do, but it makes everyone's life easier. It just makes it more seamless when many hands are going into the PowerPoint and the Excel file. So making sure at the end of the day, you're closing out everything. It's a clean slate every morning rather than having a bunch of files from the night beforehand. It's not only doing you a favor, but also doing your team members a favor if they need to hop in there for whatever reason and make their own edits. When you are sending across a deliverable, whether it's to your associate, your VP, your managing director, anyone, check your work. Now, it's a little bit harder if you're in a virtual setting, but an easy way to do this is to just always PDF it and look through it. Make sure you've gotten all the comments, reread things, no spelling errors, grammatical errors, etc. You can also use spell check on PowerPoint and Excel. So just comb through that yourself so that when you send it across to someone, you've already caught the silly mistakes, right? If you're in the office and you get comments or something like that, we'll always print it out. I know it's a waste of paper. I know it's painful printing everything out, but you really catch these glaring mistakes that aren't obvious when it's on the screen. If you're printing out a markup from a senior, go through it line by line, highlight all of the comments that you finished so you don't miss a single one. And also make sure that you're attaching, if you say please see attached, make sure you're attaching the right file. And just making sure that you're double checking everything before it's sent or before it's being seen by someone else besides you. This is an industry where detail orientation is extremely important. Being able to catch them yourself will not only make your life easier, but you'll make everyone's life a lot easier as well, and they may have a better impression of you generally. Whenever you get an email related to a certain project, a certain deal, etc., I would create a separate folder for that. The reason being is because once you think some deal or some project has died, sometimes it resurrects, okay? And when it does resurrect, sometimes your seniors ask you to find and dig up old files, old emails, etc. And sometimes it's very hard to find if you don't categorize them. What I typically like to do is first do it by industry and then the project. So if I'm in industrials and I have transportation or autos, I would put those in separate folders themselves and have subfolders for those projects. I will tend to put the ones that are live or actionable, more important, at the very top so I can easily access them. This is also an easy way to reach inbox zero, making sure you're not missing anything, because by default, if you're categorizing every single email, you will have to look through it first to make sure you know where to categorize it. A good shortcut for this is Ctrl-Shift-V. You can just click that and then just basically type in the first letter of what folder you're looking for and then just hit enter. And this shortcut is for Outlook specifically. If you're on that specific message, you just can hit that and then click to where you want to categorize it. Another best practice to do is whenever you receive some sort of email with a file that you don't already have in the drive, save it down somewhere so that you don't have to dig through that email again. Also, if you save it down and your deal team members don't want to dig through the email again, they can just go to the file path and see it there. I think it just makes everyone's lives a lot easier, and you just don't need to search through so many hundreds of emails with a similar subject line, with similar content, similar people on there. Best practices for communication. Always try to respond in a timely manner. This is an industry where things are just like that. You want to increase efficiency and accuracy/efficiency as much as possible. If you're working on multiple things and someone sends you an email, just making sure you're communicating what you're doing, when they can expect stuff, and don't be afraid to ask when the timeline of the deliverable is. If you get approached with something, just making sure everyone's on the same page, everyone has the same expectations, so that when it does come down to crunch time or you're really getting close to deadline, everyone is on board with everything. So those are some best practices that I can think of off the top of my head right now. If there are any more, I will create a part 2, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and for hopping aboard the choo-choo train. I will see you in my next investment banking series videos.